This is a Psion Organiser 2, and this is a top slot adapter of some kind, and it plugs in the top and gives you access to whatever hardware's in this box through the organiser. You need to usually have a ROM. That's the way it worked with Psion Organisers. There's a ROM in the hardware, and that's got all the codes you need, and that's loaded into the organiser and lets you operate whatever's in this box. Doesn't really matter what's in there at the moment. So these boxes have always been difficult to get hold of, I suppose, because you'd have to take something out of a box in order to get a box. So I thought it'd be an idea to have a go at 3D printing these boxes, or at least start the process of 3D printing one of these boxes. And the first samples have come back, and there's a very crude box with the sort of bit that pokes into the organiser on the end. Now, I made a mistake with this. There's some runners along here which fit into grooves in the top slot. Put those in the wrong place, which means the case didn't slide into the organiser, so I've had to cut those off, but that's an easy fix. But it does actually fit in there. It's not as pretty as this one, it hasn't got the rounded edges and so on, but does fit in, and mainly I did it to just have a look at the different materials. Here's a reproduced speech adapter for the Psion with an RP2040 chip replacing the SP0256. But the way it works is the PCB is supposed to slide into these runners here on either side, and then the connector pokes out the bottom here, and that then plugs into the organiser. It's actually that way round when you push it in. Now, a few problems with this. Well, apart from the runners, the connector is obviously not poking far enough out, so I need to sort that out. Well, actually it goes there, which is almost far enough, but not quite. I actually had a bar in there because this part here was a separate part I was going to 3D print. But anyway, that just needs sorting out. The corners could do with being rounded, and I think it's a little bit oversized as well. It's a little bit wide here. The PCB, even though it fits in the runners quite nicely actually, the case is too wide, so it doesn't fit the standard boards, but that's all fixable. What's interesting though is that I had several different materials. Now this, I believe, is injection molded ABS, which is pretty tough stuff. This isn't. This is resin actually. So this was printed by JLC 3DP, the 3D printing part of JLC PCB, and this is white resin of some kind, which is fine. It's actually pretty rigid on these sides here, because there's sort of reinforcing material, but here where you've got a long side to the box, just a sort of flat plate, it's actually fairly flexible. It's fairly tough as well, and I think with some reinforcement along here, this would actually be a pretty rigid, pretty usable box. The tongue or whatever that goes into the organiser is also pretty unflexible, and that's, what is it? I'd say that is probably very similar to the original actually. This is fairly rigid, but there is some flex to that. Now, as well as resin, I also had it printed in nylon. So this is black nylon, and this is incredibly flexible. I mean, this is woo. This is very bendy, as you can see, but it's also, I mean, it's not actually breaking when you bend it like that. And again, the sides are much more rigid because they've got the extra sort of reinforcement of the screw posts and the PCB runner down there, and that makes a huge difference. I mean, that is flexing all over the place, but this is not. That is pretty rigid. The original case, I don't know if I can get that out. The original case has got flex in it. I'll have to take this out and compare the two. So there's not a lot of difference. There's the lid for the black one. So I didn't bother with the screws in the side and trying to hide the screws. I thought I'd just stick some screws in the top, that'll be fine. And that fits on there, so you do have a lid, even though these aren't actually usable. I thought I'd do all the parts just as a test, and you can see this is very flexible. The resin one is flexible, but nowhere near as much. This sort of feels almost like paper in a way. It sort of flexes to a point and then stops, and it's quite rigid, but I think both of those materials would be pretty good. Now the main difference that I saw between them is that the resin is only rated for a sort of temperature of about 40 or 50 degrees C. Now I don't know what that rating is, I think it may start melting at that point. The nylon is something like 140, so that is much better if you can handle the flexibility of the case. And here I've got what I think is a grey resin, and this is sort of in between the two for flexibility. It's more flexible than the ABS, but I think it's actually a thinner wall there as well than the ABS, so this may not be a fair comparison, because I think the original's got thicker, it's got thicker walls on that bit. I think that was because when I designed this it was for FDM printing, and that sort of oversizes because you get a lot of sort of errors, but this is very, very smooth and accurate here. There's very small sort of matte texture on the surface, so I could make that thicker, I think, if I'm getting it printed this way, which I probably will. So yeah, 3 different materials, all of them probably would work actually, but again, this one being resin's got a lower, I think it's resin, it's got a lower working temperature, so you really probably want to go with a nylon like this. So the next stage, I'm going to fix these problems. I'm going to resize everything and see if I can make something closer to the original, but I'm still, I think, going to go with just screws on the top. I'm not really too keen on trying to put clipping mechanisms in there and things. That's a bit more straightforward, I think, just having some screws. They could be countersunk. At the moment I'm probably just going to go for Allen head bolts. So I'll have a look and see how well that works as well, because I'm sort of going to try and self-tap into these boxes, so we'll give that a go. But yeah, so the next stage probably is to carry on with this size and maybe also attempt the smaller sort of USB adapter size box, which is a fair bit smaller than that actually. But yeah, sort of worked okay apart from all the mistakes I made.